Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast. My name is Philip Ideson, a 20-year procurement practitioner, former head of procurement and advisor to procurement leaders around the world. I started Art of Procurement to help leaders and their teams access the resources they need to increase their impact through insight-driven procurement. You are listening to our flagship podcast where we pull back the curtain and shine a light on the strategies, tactics and tools that leading procurement teams are using to align their impact with the needs of their business. It's the first podcast of 2021. We finally made it. And I'm just delighted to be joined today by Jan Griffiths. Jan is the president and founder of Gravitas Detroit. Regular listeners of Art of Procurement will recognize Jan, I think, anyone who joined us for Mastermind Live in the spring. But I just want to welcome you back. I'm delighted to be able to kick off the year with you.
Thank you, Phil. It's great to be here with you, and what a great year 2021 is going to be.
Here's hoping, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So before we go there, I want to give some context for our listeners who may not have heard the last podcast we did. We did something about leadership in times of crisis back when we were all trying to get to grips with the pandemic, and we obviously did something at Mastermind Live. But for those that haven't heard you before, I just wonder if you could share a little bit of kind of your professional background before we go down the line of what you're doing today.
Yes, well, I am indeed a procurement person.
Mm-hmm.
I know I don't feel like I'm a procurement person these days, but I have over 30 years experience in purchasing and supply chain. And as you know, I started my career in Wales with Borg Warner and worked with various automotive companies. And then I did actually jump out of automotive for a year, worked for Maytag, an appliance manufacturer. And just over 2 years ago, I decided that I love leadership. And it really doesn't matter whether it's the supply chain platform, procurement platform, what it is. It's all about people working together. And we strive so hard for this ideal vision of a high performance team. And how do we get there? So I spend my days researching what that really means and helping people get to an authentic leadership place where they can generate that high performance team they so desperately deserve.
So what compelled you to say, I've had and I'm having a successful corporate career? I mean, you were in senior leadership positions, to say this is something that's so compelling, so, I guess fundamental or foundational to your belief that you wanted to go and do this as opposed to continue the career that you had on the corporate side.
Yeah, well, I had reached my ideal job, Phil. I worked all my career. I started off as an assistant buyer, actually a temp, and worked my way through purchasing and supply chain. And I reached that CPO position and a major tier one company. It was at the time, it was a $3 billion company, a global team, lots of visibility in the industry, made it to the top 100 leading women in automotive. Everything was great, bought a nice house in a nice area, nice car, all the things we aspire to. But I wasn't happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people are thinking, what? How could you not be happy? Something wasn't aligned, something wasn't right. I wasn't living my life truly in accordance with my values.
Yeah.
And life in the C-suite, be careful what you wish for. And it was great. I had a lot of great experiences and a lot of great people I worked with. But there were days when I felt the life force draining out of me. And if I had to see another PowerPoint presentation with a number that had just been tweaked from the month before, I'd rather have a root canal, quite frankly, than have to see another one of those, right?
It just wasn't getting the fulfillment. And you know what? It's really, I think, powerful and empowering to say that and do something about it. Because my personal journey was the same. There was only so long you could complain about not enjoying yourself before, either you got to shut up and get on with it, because that's kind of the role that you've created for yourself, or you got to go and do something about it. And it takes a lot to go and do something about it.
Yes. And I knew the way that I wanted to lead. And now we have a term for it. We call it authentic leadership. But I always thought that maybe I was a little off, or it wasn't the right thing to do. There was never anybody around to tell me, what you're thinking and what you believe about leadership is right on. There was
Yeah.
nobody there to tell me that. And I hired a leadership coach and she helped me down that path. And I thought, oh, so actually everything that I've been thinking over all these decades is actually the right way to lead. I thought that I was supposed to have this busy calendar full of stuff to do all day long,
Hmm.
when really my gut was telling me, no, you need to empower your people, give them the opportunity to advance, develop, and yes, fail. And it's all okay. Just be there to support them. And there was this model in corporate America that told me, no, 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 you just need to be busy and you need to be down into the detail of every single supplier issue out there, which was quite ridiculous in a $3 billion
Hmm.
company with global complexity. But that was sort of the badge of honor that you were expected to wear. And it never felt right to me. And, now I understand a lot more about the leadership styles and philosophies and strategies that you can employ so you don't have to live your life like that. And then I couldn't take it anymore. I mean, I was safe, everything was great, I wasn't
Hmm.
restructured out. And I thought, okay, you're in your early 50s, you can ride this out to retirement and it'll be great.
Yeah.
Or you can actually do what you really, really love to do, which is work with people and teams on leadership and help them get through these barriers that we put in our minds. And so I did, Phil, and I took my salary to zero overnight. That's exciting.
Yes. Yeah, tell me about it. And it's the roller coaster that is so cliche, and you think on the outside, you look at the numbers that you deal with when you're on the inside, and you think, you know what, it shouldn't be too much of an issue to even be able to get a fraction of that because I know what I'm worth, I know the value I can bring. Oh, how naive, I was when I started that.
Yeah, isn't that
Um,
true? Me too.
Um, so 2020 being 2020, we're looking forward to leaving it in the rearview mirror. But I have to ask, what were some of the ways that you kept going, kept the spirits high, kept yourself accountable? How was 2020 for you?
Well, as we talked, and we actually did a podcast episode on the subject leading through the pandemic.
Hmm.
And I viewed the pandemic as a great opportunity for leadership to step up and lead at a very deeply human level. This was not the time for command and control. This was not the time to be aggressive and alienate people. This was a time to bring people closer to you and understand, this shared struggle that we've all been going through dealing with the pandemic. In the early days, we couldn't get toilet paper and we didn't
Right.
know if we were going to be able to get food. You can't ignore those things that people are going through. You have to connect with them. So I think that it pulled people closer to a more authentic leadership style than perhaps they had been previously.
Hmm.
So I saw it as a great opportunity for leaders. Personally, it sucked because my business was wiped out overnight
Yeah.
because I had two big speaking gigs booked and there wasn't much call for a keynote speaker in a room full of hundreds of people when COVID hit. So I thought, okay, all right, what are we gonna do, right? So I licked my wounds for a couple of days. Did the old Netflix binge, few Netflix series, and we're human. It's not bad. It's just admit it. We do
Yeah.
need a Netflix day every once in a while, and it's all okay. And I thought, well, there must be other people out there that are feeling a bit like me. And I'm the one, Phil, I'm the one that stands on the stage and tells people, I like to get up at 4:30 in the morning and don't
Mhm.
hit the snooze and off you go. And I was hitting the snooze and I was feeling, oh my gosh, what's going on? So I threw something out there on social media, which again, this is something I love to do. You've heard the term like burn the boats, right? Where you just put the idea out there, you throw it out there, you make the commitment. You don't really know what it's going to take to get there. You just know that you're going to figure it out. So I put something out on social media and I said, hey, I'm going to start this accountability clinic and, just to help us get a morning routine and keep things going during the pandemic. And if you want to join me, you're welcome to. So a couple people signed up. And I said, "Oh, and by the way, we're starting the calls at 6:30 in the morning." Right.
You didn't
Right.
get any all your drop offs then at that point.
So, you had to be pretty committed if you were going to
Hmm.
do this at 6:30 every weekday morning. And, we are recording this Christmas week and it is week 40 of that
Right.
accountability clinic, which we renamed Accountability Lab. I'll tell you why in a minute. But yeah, so it grew. We've got 12 people that call into this call at 6:30 in the morning, and it gives people a routine, and it's only 30 minutes. So it's not
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, the last thing I need is another hour Zoom call, right? But we show up, we're fully transparent. I seriously see myself for the first time on camera on that Zoom call in the morning. We don't even look in the mirror. Sometimes we've even got our PJs on and it's all okay
Mhm.
because there's no judgment.
Yep.
And then we just we do a few things. We make a commitment about a work task that we're going to do that day. We make a commitment for something personal because, you can't, it's so easy these days working from home to just work, 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 right? And forget
Mhm.
about the personal. So whether it's you go for a walk, yoga, something, and then a word to describe your mindset, because how you talk to yourself in your head in that mindset that you set up determines your mood for the day, which will determine how your day goes. You can either set it
Mhm.
up for success or set it up for failure.
Yeah.
And that's what we started doing.
So you mentioned you changed the name from clinic to lab. What was the story behind that?
Yeah, well, a clinic is somewhere that you go for help on
Yeah.
something. And that's originally how it started. But then it evolved because we were really experimenting with different ways to help each other with personal accountability
Mhm.
in doing what we said we planned to do. And if you tell yourself in your head you're going to do something, there's a pretty good chance you'll talk yourself out of it and you'll push it off,
Yeah.
right? And we all know it. If you make that commitment to other people, you're using the power of peer pressure in a positive way.
Mhm.
When we think of peer pressure, we think of somebody making you smoke or drink when you're a teenager, right? But you can use peer pressure in a positive way. And when you actually verbalize out loud that you're going to do something, you're starting to program your brain to actually do it.
Yeah.
And you make that commitment to others, and then you have to come back on that call the next day and say whether or not you did it. I mean, we all fail and it's a safe space. I do it. Often I'll come in and say, yeah, I did my personal task, but I failed on my work task, and here's why. And then we talk about, well, what can we do to help with that? Why are we being distracted? So it's more of a lab because we're experimenting with
Mhm.
different ways to make it happen.
Yeah. No, it's funny you say about those personal commitments. I feel like episode 1 of Art of Procurement was a personal commitment, like putting that out there, not having a clue what I was going to be doing with it, but then making a commitment to an audience, an audience of one probably at that point. But, making a public proclamation that I was going to be doing this kept me accountable to doing it. I've also done it, like people may have seen this year when I posted a little bit about kind of the fitness and weight loss journey and things. Like the whole reason for me to post that online is not for for encouragement and support, which has been fantastic. It truly has been amazing, but it's really so that I know that I'm making the commitment to everyone who's seen that I can't rest on my laurels, because now I owe it to everybody else who's seen that and encouraged me to keep on going. So I think it's really powerful by making those commitments publicly.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
and and it's about small incremental steps of improvement. And if you had told me that when I was in my CPO job, I would have probably laughed at it, and said, "Oh, what are you talking about?" But I've learned from people that I've interviewed on my podcast, specifically Nick Norris, who's a Navy SEAL. I said, "Why?" Because he's extreme performance, and he's a Navy SEAL. He's used to go into extreme conditions, and then he ran a race right before I talked to him. I think he ran like 53 miles, right? I said, "How do you do that? How do you program your mind when your mind tells you, 'Oh, I can't go any further. I'm done.'" How do you
yeah.
do that? And he said, small incremental steps of improvement. And we forget how powerful these
Mhm.
little things, these little corrections to our daily routines can be in achieving great things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think patience as well, and then in waiting for a result to happen, and not looking at something and saying, "Hey, it didn't work for a week." It's never going to work, because a lot of these small things compound on each other over time. Now we want to look forward to 2021. and embrace 2021, kind of put 2020 behind us. And as we're doing that, really what I want to talk about today is kind of a process for not only setting ultimately goals and objectives, but then how do you actually individually keep yourself accountable to achieving those? But from a leadership perspective, how does a leader and how can a leader help empower their team to actually achieve and overachieve on those goals and objectives? So when it comes to actually setting goals that I don't want to say achievable, because maybe setting achievable goals is kind of getting a cheap way out because you already know before you start you're going to achieve them. But kind of audacious goals, like how do you go about it? What kind of process do you go through to turn, hey, I'd like to do this, into some very measurable steps and objectives that you can take?
First of all, I take a very different view of goal setting. And the framework I use is dream it, brand it, own it. And
Mm-hmm.
let's start with the dream it piece, which is the visionary piece of it, right? So if you picture yourself at the top of the mountain and you've achieved success, whatever that success is, and that's obviously that should be something that you talk to other stakeholders in the business about. It should be a
Mm-hmm.
very high lofty business goal, not just a procurement or supply chain goal. So what is that lofty thing that we're trying to achieve? Then instead of doing what we normally do, which is stand at the bottom of the mountain and look up and say, okay, so what do we have to do to get there? Right. And then we look at all the steps that we've got to get there. It's really, really difficult when you take that view. When you put yourself on top of the mountain and you talk about what it really feels like to be in that position, to achieve that position of success. And then you look down and then you start to map the steps to get there. You would be amazed how powerful that is. And when I talk to business leaders about this, they go, oh my God, this lady's crazy, right? It's like, no, 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 no. Be careful. There's some science to it. And what you're doing is you're programming your brain for success. And the brain
Mm-hmm.
has a very difficult time distinguishing between what's real and what's not. So when you're talking about feeling this success, you're starting to program your brain to accept it and be more accepting and bringing things in towards it. Extreme athletes, high performance athletes do this. And there's a lot of data behind this. They will actually sit and think about the winning play.
Mm-hmm.
Tiger Woods does it. He'll think about what that winning play or swing will be like, will look like. Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player, was notorious for it. He would
Mm-hmm.
think about where he was on the ice rink and the different moves and positions, where the puck was and where he was in relation to the puck. And he really thought through the game and success before he played the game.
Mm-hmm.
So putting yourself in that winning mindset is key to everything. There's a million tools out there about how to establish the vision and goals. But to me, getting that mindset right is critical.
So as you are putting yourself in that kind of, and I use perhaps a sports term again, but that winning mentality, that it kind of empowers you, I think, to achieve. If you think that you can achieve and you can see what it looks like, then how do you bridge the gap between seeing what you can achieve, kind of feeling what you can achieve, and then what do I need to do to make that happen?
You got to get rid of the barriers in your thinking first.
Mm-hmm.
So once you get rid of those barriers, then what I would typically do is to bring a whole group of people around me and together talk about what are the steps needed to get there. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think often as a leader, sometimes of a function, you think that you're supposed to know it all and you're supposed to map out the steps.
Yeah.
You're not. Use other stakeholders. And when you bring other stakeholders in and people within your own team, then they have some buy-in to that
Mm-hmm.
vision. The worst thing in the world as a leader is to come up with a vision or a goal and go, well, there it is.
Yep.
And people have had no input into it whatsoever. You'll alienate people. If you want people to really buy in and feel it, you've got to talk about what does it feel and what are we going to do when we succeed? Are we going to have a party? Are we going to go somewhere or do something? Maybe not in a COVID world, but what are we going to do to celebrate it? Imagine having that conversation before you even start to put together the plan to
Yeah.
achieve it.
So what are some of the barriers that leaders need to break through to be able to do that? You talked about, limiting beliefs and mindset. What are the ways do you see, if somebody's coming in, you're kind of having that conversation and they're a little bit reticent because maybe they feel that it's going to make them vulnerable, to overcome that?
Well, fear of failure is
Yeah.
is huge. We're human beings and we don't like that. We don't like to fail. So establishing an environment and a culture of trust where failure is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we shiver at the thought, right? Because we're afraid of judgment. We don't want people to think that we're weak or we failed. And we want people to like us. Now, that might sound like a conversation you're having at a kindergarten level, but
Yeah.
believe me, it plays out in the C suite and all throughout corporations all over the world. We're human beings and we want to be liked. And we don't want to alienate people. We don't want to push people away. So there's all these things going on in our heads. We have to have that bone deep commitment to something,
Mm-hmm.
to that vision, to that goal. When you have that, then you can work through all those barriers and you create this environment of trust and support, and you really support your people. So, what that means is if you've got step one to achieving your goal and somebody takes a misstep and fails,
Mm-hmm.
you don't take their head off. You don't yell at them. You understand what happened, why it happened. You support them. It's a learning experience. Everybody learned from it, and you move on. We'll never get to innovation if we don't start to create this safe environment.
Now, you talked about creating a safe environment and a lot of the mindset elements of it. As we look at individual goals that roll up, and you think about how can we make this so it's can be objectively measured. How do you transform those goals into something on paper that you can track over the course of the year to see if those objectives and those goals are being met, like making it real, if you will.
Yes. Well, there's two types, right? There are hard numbers that we all
Mm-hmm.
have to meet in a business, but there are other objectives that are more based around the culture and how we behave. And without that behavioral piece, you won't get the numbers. Or you can certainly achieve much more
Mm-hmm.
with the numbers if you get the behavioral piece. Because if you look at why you don't get the numbers and why teams fail, it goes right back to behavior and culture. When
Yeah.
you really dive deep, that's where it's at. I've seen it play out a million times. So getting that right. Now, here's an idea that I've been working with several clients just recently in the last 6 weeks, actually, and that is to develop a team brand.
Mm-hmm.
So to understand your strengths, both individually and as a team, and then develop a brand. And it's simple conversations like, how do we want to be known in this business? How do we want to be known in the industry? How do we want to be known as a function? What are some of the traits of our brand as a team? That gives you a map, almost like a behavioral map.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you a place to have a discussion. So if somebody is doing something and they're not supporting the brand, they're not being an ambassador of a brand. I'll give you a real example. Everybody wants to be known for credibility, for doing things on time, for showing up for meetings on time. That's simple brand trait, right? As a team. And then somebody starts, missing dates or coming in late to meetings. The discussion can be something around, let's go back to, we said that this is who we want to be as a team. And this behavior doesn't seem to be in line with the brand. So can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Gives you a place, a structure to have those conversations.
Yeah, I love that because it goes into the idea that we really believe in as procurement or any organization, because these traits can obviously be applied to any organization, but as a service provider within a business. So you're looking at yourself as if you're an individual business within a business, and I always say that's not to say that we do all the things that our stakeholders want us to do, because then you're just showing up and you're helping them with a transaction. We want to be there challenging them, but doing it in a way where you're really thinking about your value proposition, and part of your value proposition is the brand, and that's how you communicate what you do. So being able to tie that in is something that really resonates.
Yeah, and you can really galvanize the team and the business around it. And I did a workshop with a company just a few weeks ago, and it was an engineering function.
Hmm.
And when you don't think of an engineering function doing something like this, but we came up with their brand identity, and they have their own tagline and they have
Yeah.
their own hashtag. So they're able to do a lot with that.
Hmm. Yeah, it rallies everybody into, like you say, a single vision or a single goal, or at least that they're part of a collective rather than individual. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of leaders that are listening that think about their team, and they'll be they may be listening to this and saying, you know what, there's a couple of people on my team that are just never going to get with the program, or they don't care about goals and objectives. They're just happy, sadly, just picking up their salary and kind of waiting time out. How do you approach somebody within that, within that constraint? Like, as a leader, are they to be, is there a point of no return, or are there things that you can do, even if it's not going to be immediate, to try and at least bring them along the lines of the team thinking?
I think there's a few things. First of all, you have to connect with that person as a human being and
Hmm.
understand what's going on as to why they're not contributing the way that you would like them to contribute. So there's some one-on-one work that has to take place. But then it's creating this team, this high performance team environment where people are filling in the gaps for each other. Now that's not to say that other people need to fill in the gaps for some person who
Yeah.
isn't pulling their own weight, but we all have certain strengths that we bring to a team, and they're not necessarily the strengths that you see on a resume or in a job description.
Hmm.
There's different ways of getting things done, maybe some soft skills, and getting the team to involve that person more, because I'm guessing that person feels like they're an outsider
Right.
and that perhaps they're not valued in the
Hmm.
team. So one on one first, but then making sure that you are indeed that inclusive leader and encouraging that person to be more involved with the team and the team is engaging with them. Then at the end of the day, if it's still not happening, then you got to make the tough call, right? And if the person is toxic, you cannot tolerate that in your
Hmm.
culture, and you got to make the tough call. But I normally, there's something in there that if you just connect and find it. And here's the thing, Phil, as leaders in business, we're not trained psychologists and psychiatrists, right? But yet our job is to really connect with people, and everybody's different. So it takes a different approach for every single person on your team and help them unleash their potential.
Yeah.
So there's a
Yeah.
lot of these human skills, and I really see 2021 as a year where people will be far more focused on soft skills. I prefer to call them human skills, and
Hmm.
truly authentic leadership, and getting back to values and who they are, and really getting away and throwing away this corporate mask.
Yeah, I think that's very much the case. We've seen as the pandemic has progressed, you've gone from obviously office to online. And then when you first go online, I think everyone was kind of trying to replicate the structure of an office, but doing it remotely. And then over time, some of those norms fell away, and it's more about the human rather than the facade, if you will. But, with everybody kind of running, it's not particularly a fancy term, but running around like a headless chicken, the last few months to try and get things done. I speak with a lot of leaders who recognize the fact that they were not able to focus on the wellness of their employees and the mental health of their employees and kind of the team structure and all those things over the last few months as that change happened, because of just the demands to keep up with what was going on, the changes that were happening on a daily basis. And so I was thinking about 2021, we're at a point where I think we've got a better view of what the future looks like. So, but we're still working in this environment where it still is mostly online and remote. So those two are going to have to come together, where I believe that there's a lot more thought that needs to go into how do we work as teams in this environment. Because while I hate the term, and I know a lot of people I talk to hate the term of the new normal, it feels like this is kind of this is more business as usual going forward than what we had
Yes.
before March.
Yes, yes, I think so. Yeah, and there is, of course, face to face. We always will prefer face to face. We're human beings. We like to connect, but just making time for those one on ones, right? It's so easy to push them off
Mhm.
the schedule. And now more than ever, it's important to keep those one-on-ones. And they don't have to be an hour. You don't have to be a slave to your scheduling
Right.
tool. Schedule 20 minutes,
Yep.
15 minutes even, but just those little touch points. And the one thing that I've learned maybe since the creation of the accountability lab, if I were to go back into a corporate role again, let's hope that doesn't happen, but if
Anyone
I
watching on the
would,
video will see the face that you pulled as you
yeah, yeah, yeah.
considered that thought.
Oh, one day I'm going to be interviewing for a job, and then they're going to show up for this video, right? No, but I would definitely have this daily touch point,
Hmm.
because it is about these small incremental steps of improvement. And imagine if every single person on your team made one little step of improvement every single day. And I'm on this call, with 12 people. We're off in 30 minutes, and we're course correcting every single day, rather than have these monthly meetings or weekly reviews, or people are generating PowerPoints or task lists. What if you just did that every day? So if I was back in the corporate world, I would implement that immediately
Hmm.
without fail. People would probably hate me for it, but they'd get over it after a while, because we have some fun. And then you support each other. It's amazing how this accountability group just jumps in, and
Yep.
because there's no job description, obviously, right? Everybody's different. And they just jump in to support each other when there's a need. And no, there's no judgment, and everybody's fully transparent, and nobody's trying to be something they're not, because at 6:30 with a camera in your face, you can't
Mhm.
be.
There's no hiding.
No.
Uh, I think what's important is the way you frame that. So that it's really easy for somebody to look at, a leader or their manager or whatever wanting to have regular check-ins as I don't trust you, and so I'm checking up on you, versus I'm here because I want us to stay connected. Two very different things, and I think two very different objectives. But to somebody on the receiving end, they can feel the same.
Yes. And here's something that I've learned, is that you're not fooling anybody.
Mhm.
So if you think that you're scheduling a checkup meeting, let's just or check-in meeting, and you think, oh, I just want to check in with you, see how things are going, but really you don't trust that person, and I'm checking
Mhm.
up on you to make sure you're working. The person knows it. You
Yeah.
can feel it. Even if you don't have the cameras on, you just know it. So you're not fooling anybody. So we have to, as leaders, you have to trust your team. And so maybe they're not going to do much work that day, and it's their Netflix day.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
They'll probably crank it up and do 3 times more work the next day. We've got to learn to work with our energy levels, and not so much within this structured time that really came out of the Industrial Revolution, right? Which was generated, decades ago, right? Work with the energy level, and work on objectives and outcomes, right? Not on very rigid structure and
Yeah.
tasks.
Yeah, that if the green light isn't next to somebody on the IM panel of your email, it means that they're not working. And that's one of the things that I really struggled with during my career was, very much, that you measure me on the outcomes, not on the minutes that I actually spend doing them, because that's just personally how I worked best. You're going to get them, you're going to get the results, but if you're at home, you're mixing a lot of different responsibilities, so it doesn't matter when you're online or when you're not online. It matters that you get it done, get the job done.
Yes, exactly.
Um, so let's start to wrap up and think about 2021. What does 2021 look like for you as you think about goals and objectives?
Well, I'm excited about 2021, because the accountability lab was born during the pandemic, and now
Mm-hmm.
it's taken off. And I have accountability lab 2, which
Awesome.
starts at 7:07 in the morning in Eastern time zone. And then January 4th, I open Accountability Lab 3 on the West Coast. So this, is not, quite frankly, Phil, where I thought my business would go, but it is certainly a big part of my business right now. And then focusing on work with teams, whether it's a business leadership or functional leadership, to help them feel motivated and inspired for 2021, and working with the team branding and strengths. And I am loving that part of the work too. So to me, 2020 is very exciting. I am up for it. I am ready to go.
So if people are interested in the Accountability Lab, learning a little bit more, or about the workshops and the coaching that you do, where is the best place for them to find you?
The website, gravitasdetroit.com. That's a great place to find me. And also my personal, you can connect with me on my personal LinkedIn at Jan Griffiths.
All right. Well, I'm going to, as I always do, I'm going to link up to those in the show notes for today's episode. So people can go and find that at artofprocurement.com/podcast, and you'll be able to find this episode. I'm actually really excited that we're going to be working together as well. A little bit later in the year, we're going to be working together in April. So a date for your diary is April 13th and 14th, because those are the dates that we have penciled in for our Mastermind Live Spring event, which I'm really excited to say that you're going to be emceeing and hosting and generally holding together for us for a couple of days. So I can't wait for that.
Yeah, I am thrilled to be doing that, Phil, because, we'll have fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be a lot of content because you have this knack of finding the greatest speakers to bring to the table. And I have to tell you, it was my first, in your mastermind was my first exposure to Joanna Martinez, who was absolutely incredible. Everything she said totally resonated with me. But, you have this ability to bring together all these great people around a very focused area of procurement. Which I happen to love. Yes, I love leadership, but I've got to admit,
it helps that you know the procurement side too.
It does, and I love being a part of AOP and being able to support AOP.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm really excited as we start to put the event together to share with everybody what the event's going to look like, what we're going to be doing in it, the direction we're going to take. So watch this space for that. As I mentioned before, anybody who wants to connect with Jan can go to the show notes at artofprocurement.com/podcast. And here's to a great 2021. And thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Phil. Same to you.
Thank you. I want to thank you for listening into today's episode of The Art of Procurement. To go deeper, including access to transcripts and actionable outtakes from the podcast, join the free level of our AOP Mastermind community. To learn more, go to artofprocurement.com/mastermind. And to find our entire back catalogue of almost 400 episodes, go to